right, hello everyone. We don't have a PowerPoint for this particular lesson, but you get to see my adorable dogs there for a second. We are going to discuss some research scaffolding, and then I'm going to show you the example of what I am looking for this particular assignment for Friday, where you're turning in your lit review thesis and your works cited page. I also got a new microphone that's a real microphone, so I'm not sure how this is going to work, if you're going to be able to hear all of the traffic that's going by my window or what's going to happen, but I'm half into my closet right now to try and keep things sort of the outside world sort of muffled. So let me know how it goes, if there's a lot of outside random noises happening. So, just as a reminder though, first thing, we don't have a midterm actual test in this class, but your midterm quiz is live right now. So, if you go to the homepage for our class in D2L, excuse me, then it is ready. It is there for you to take. There's 10 questions. It's going to be open from today, which is Monday. I'm actually recording this on Monday through Friday. So make sure that you do it before Friday, not Sunday, Friday. And you can earn up to an extra 5 points on your overall midterm grade and 5 points on your lit review. So make sure that you are looking at that. I also will note that, as I said, today is Monday. So I'm not for sure. I know at this point that we are not having class in the classroom on Tuesday, because there's been another COVID exposure in another class that meets in the same classroom. So at this point on Tuesday, the classroom is closed. I do not know about Thursday yet. So just keep an eye on D2L. I'll post it that morning, whether or not we will be in the classroom. Please do not email me and ask me. It will be there. That information will be there. It'll say we are not, clearly. So just check that on Thursday morning for those of you that meet on Thursdays, and those of you that meet on Tuesdays are probably just watching this right now. So awesome. All right, so today what we're going to look at is a worksheet that I've attached for you. Hold on, where did I put it? There it is. That I attached for you in the news section, and I'll put it in the class handouts part of content as well. This is something that'll help you with writing not only your research paper, but also your literature review, because it pretty much just defines out what you're going to be doing. So this is an example that I have one that's got all the stuff filled in for it, and then I've also got one that is blank, so you can use it for yourself. So we're going to go over this and kind of see how this works, and then I'm going to show you the example of what we will be doing, what you'll be turning in on Friday. So this particular person's research question is, how does color affect one's mood? So then it's got a space for you to do the hook. So you want to start out with your intro. You want to start out your paper with some sort of hook, something that's going to be interesting, something that's going to grab the reader's attention. So in this person, they decided to say, colors seem simple, but they affect people. If someone is angry, it could be because they are surrounded by or looking at the color red. You will notice that there is an exclamation point here. Please do not use exclamation points in academic writing unless you have a really, really good reason for it. People's moods can change depending on what colors they are looking at. One simple color can affect a person's whole mood. So that could be the start of their paper. That could be the beginning of their intro, and then they go on to explain their thesis beyond that. So now this is where we go into the literature review part of it. So this is the part that you can use. You can fill this out as you go along with your different sources, and it pretty much writes your literature review for you. There's space for 5 articles. Now, you remember, for your literature review, you only have to have 3. You should only have exactly 3. Don't go over the top. But for your final research paper, you're going to have at least 5. So this gives you a space to put 5 in here, and you can always make more copies of it and stuff as you fill it out if you want to do this. So gives you a space to keep where the author is, when it was written, and the main idea about the subject is. So this is what is the argument that this particular writer is making. Color does affect mood by producing chemicals and stimulating feelings such as hunger. So that's the overall argument in that particular piece. And then we've got some facts. So these are some of the things that you're going to use because as you write your paper, you're going to talk about, well, how are they making that argument? So what are the things that they're saying that support that argument? Blue is calm because it releases calming chemicals. Red can make you hungry because it's an appetite stimulant. Yellow is also a appetite stimulant. That's why, just so you know, that is why there's a lot of fast food restaurants that are yellow and red, like McDonald's and Wendy's and stuff like that. Yellow, irritated people lose temper more in yellow rooms, which I think is kind of interesting. And pink is tranquilizing and makes one feel weak, which I don't really appreciate because I'm recording this on International Women's Day, and we often think of pink being associated with females, and then pink also being associated with weak is not okay. So that's an issue that I have with that little fact right there. But perhaps it's just this one particular author's idea, wherever the research came from. So then there's a conclusion that depending on the color, one's body can do things like produce chemicals that make it act in a certain way. So you've got a space for each one of these where you've got the argument, you've got some facts that they use to support their argument, and then the overall conclusion for your paper, or for that particular source that you can use in your paper. So now we got another one. This particular person says that the effect of color produces is based on what one's body does in response. So this one is focusing on producing chemicals and stimulating feelings, while this one is focused on the body. So you see how they're still talking about color, but they're focusing on different outcomes of color. And these are the things you should be noticing as you're reading through your particular sources. Yellow is mentally stimulating and activates memory. Red increases confidence. Maybe that's why Tiger Woods always wears a red shirt when he plays golf. You know, it's increasing his confidence there. Brown makes one feel orderly and stable. Dark blue makes one feel sad. So this is the different things that they're talking about based on the body's response. Although you can see that some of these are feelings and emotions like what they're talking about up here. So you can see there's those connections there. Conclusion here is that different colors do in fact change one's mood, and our reaction to color affects the choices we make. And of course, you will not use words like our or we when you write your paper because that is not academic. And then we got a third writer who says color can affect one's mood, but the effect can also depend on culture and one's personal reflection. So the first two were kind of talking about body and things like that. This particular one is going to be talking about culture and outside influences and things like that, personal experience. So you see there's a slightly different, experience and slightly different argument in each one of these. So someone from Japan might not associate red with anger. I don't know what people from Japan associate red with, but it obviously is not necessarily anger based on the culture perhaps there. If someone likes the color brown, they might associate it with happiness. So in other words, if your favorite color, that's the color that you're going to like the best. So it just kind of depends on your personal response to it, Going back to the color pink, like that's just not one of my favorite colors, so it doesn't make me feel happy to see that. I don't actually really have one particular favorite color, but, pink's not really it, so. Pink reduces aggression, which is why jail cells are pink in Seattle. Now again, I don't enjoy this because it's saying weak, and now it's saying not aggressive. So I feel like that there's something about pink being associated with women that's patriarchy, trying to keep women down, and I don't appreciate it. And brown makes one feel comforted. So there's some different reasons for that. And then the conclusion for that one is colors affect one's mood, but there are other factors that can affect it too. So we've got a slightly different argument there. Fourth source. The main point about color psychology is that color has both a physiological and psychological effect. So physiological, we're talking about actual movement of the body and things that are happening in the body, versus psychological, things that are happening in the brain. So green relaxes because it relaxes muscles and makes one breathe deeply and slowly. And blue lowers blood pressure, which makes one calm. So you could probably think that I always think of doctors' offices being green and blue and very pale colors. Maybe that's to calm people down. Color affects mood because it affects one's body. So we're still focused a little bit on the body here. So we kind of go back to similar argument to the second source. And then we got to yet another idea, as it says right here, yet another idea, that color is energy and it has a physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional effect on people. So now we've been talking about mental, physical, and emotional effects, but this is the first time we've really mentioned spiritual. So this particular source has got a little bit of an added effect in there that we haven't doing that. And also they spelled affect wrong. It should be effect here. Affect is a verb. Anyways, I didn't fill this out. I just found it online. So black is sophisticated and secure, but also depressed. It can depend on how you wear it. So you think about like a black power suit when people are going to work and that kind of thing versus someone who wears dark colors when they, don't feel very good about themselves. That could be the difference in how you see that particular color. Brown is reliable and serious, and yellow lifts one's self-esteem. So maybe like sunshine, I don't know. So the author concludes that different colors have different effects on people, which is kind of a generic argument that is kind of boring there. Obviously, different colors have different effects on people, but if that's what they wrote, then that's what they wrote. So if you fill this out, you have pretty much written your literature review. You just have to rearrange it and combine these things in different ways. And I have written my literature review that I'm going to show you in a few minutes so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So, now this is, all right. This is analysis. So this is where you're actually looking at combining and comparing and contrasting the different sources that you've looked at. So we've got 3 main ideas about color psychology. The main ideas are colors affects one's mood. They differ based on what factors influence the effect of color, such as culture, opinion, and what goes on inside one's body. So then you explain how the ideas are different or the same, which is what you're doing in your paper. One of the 3 ideas says color affects one's mood based on personal opinion. For example, if one dislikes pink, it can be associated with hate. I don't hate it. I just don't really like it that much. Another idea says that color affects one's mood based on one's own culture. An example of this is that someone from the U.S. may associate green with envy, while people in Japan think of yellow when they talk about envy. However, the majority of the sources say that this color affects mood by affecting what's going on inside one's body. Seeing blue releases calming chemicals, which makes one calm. Because yellow is the hardest color for the eye to focus on, people may become irritated when looking at yellow. I did not know that. And babies cry most in yellow nurseries, which is interesting when all these parents, when they try to do a quote-unquote gender neutral color, they always pick yellow. Maybe that's why the babies don't like it. They say pick a pink, pick a blue, do something like that. All right, so this particular part is not necessarily something you're going to use. You're not really going to be doing your own original research. In other words, you're not going to be going out and like passing out questionnaires or interviewing like research subjects and things like that. You may interview people, but it'll be more for a source, like experts and things like that. But you're not really going to do your own original research. So you can really kind of skip over this. This is what they did here is they gave a test to some middle school students about how they feel about the different colors and how they make them feel and that kind of thing. So we've got up through this where you're talking about the analysis stuff. That is your research. That's your literature review. And you're also going to use that information when you start writing your research paper. And then we get down here, and this is how it continues on to your research paper. So conclusion, what is the answer to the question? Which you are not going to be answering in your literature review, remember, but you will be answering in your researched argument. So the most likely explanation seems to be that color does affect one's mood, but the effects are different for girls and boys. However, there are some similarities. Some results in the student survey were different from the cited research. It is now obvious that the colors have a great effect on mood. So, they came to a full conclusion there, which is going to pretty much work out to what your thesis statement is going to be. That's what your thesis statement for your research paper is, the answer to your research question. So you have a space to write that, and that can help you work on your thesis. Then there's a spot for you to write your for your works cited page there. And like I said, I'll have this attached to on D2L where you can fill this out yourself and use that for writing your paper. So beyond that, let's look at what I want for you to, let's make it a little bit bigger though. What I want you to turn in to me for this particular, for Friday. So I just chose a topic that I used to work with a lot. So it's talking about and I put a trigger warning. There's nothing really graphic. It's just kind of mentions of dating and sexual violence. But I just wanted to warn people of that. But this is what I'm looking for you to turn in on Friday. So I put this on here just to make it easier if you want to add this, just to remind me what your topic and your question are, so I don't have to look back. It'll make it a little easier for me. But research topic that I chose: the connection between teen dating violence and relationship violence and mass media consumed by young people. So that's the topic. And then the question, supposedly, that I had is, are teens who watch or listen to more examples of relationship violence and mass media more likely to commit violence in their own dating relationships? Am I answering that question in this paper? No, I am not. But what I'm going to do is look at 3 different sources that I found for it. So my thesis for the literature review is: the 3 sources agree that viewing depictions of violence in mass media increase the likelihood of violence in teen relationships, but they differ as to what degree and why mass media actually influences young people. So what I found was they all came around saying that yes, there is some influence, but they weren't very specific about it, and they just said there is some effect, and they didn't really say why for the most part. So that is my thesis statement. And then I have my works cited page down here. So I've got 3 different sources that are in the proper format, that are hanging indent, nothing centered. There's not just a list of links. That is not a works cited page. Don't just put a link, 3 links on there and be like, I'm done. You're not done. Make sure that you do this. And then once you've got this like this, you don't have to retype these. You can use them again for when you actually do your full paper, which I have done right here. Now, you're not going to do it like this necessarily. What I did was just to give you, I did this really for you. So this is the basic outline of my paper. So you can see, like, this is what I did in the paper. There's a title, of course. Please put a title in your paper. Not everyone does that, but you should. And then there's the introduction that introduces the sources with a thesis that argues how the sources agree or disagree. So that's what I just showed you. And then I did a paragraph these are the list of the paragraphs in here. And you will notice if you look down here, mine's way longer than yours needs to be. I had trouble trying to narrow myself down. I actually cut a bunch of stuff out of it because I wanted to go into more detail. And then I was like, well, I just can't stop. But I did add a bunch of extra little notations for you all to look at. So that's part of why there's so many words in this. But this is actually longer than your research paper needs to be. But the paragraphs were, after the intro, summary of the first source, summary of the second source, summary of the third source, then an explanation of how they agreed, how they disagreed, and then problems that I noticed with the sources. So like problems that I had with actually researching, and then a conclusion, and then I have my works cited page. So we'll go over this a little bit more in class, but I just wanted to show you, and I've put, don't do this. I did this for you. So you can see, like, this is what's in this paragraph, and then this is what's in this paragraph. Don't do this. But that's just for me to show you. So got a title, literature review, mass media influences on teen dating violence. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but there's an intro here where I start out explaining, like, this is some of the, television shows and movies based around the lives of young adults are popular sources of entertainment, and with the rapid consumption of popular media and daily life, depictions and glorification of unhealthy, dramatic teen relationships can lead to teen interpersonal violence in the real world. Can you see how I have so many words in this paper? But you see, I'm introducing the subject, so we know kind of what we're talking about, like what's going to be the subject that we're looking at. And then I continue on with that, and then I give a little introduction. So in one article, writers examine the effect of sex-centered comedy films on teens' sexual attitudes and behaviors, while another article looks at how viewing relational aggression on television can lead to actual violence in teen relationships. See, within one sentence, I've introduced 2 different sources. And then a third source discusses the effects of nonviolent female subservient depictions in rap videos on African American teens' attitudes toward dating violence. So within that, I gave like a 1-sentence summary of each source that I've got there in my intro, and then I have my thesis statement that again tells how the arguments in the sources agree and disagree. The 3 sources agree that viewing depictions of violence in mass media increases the likelihood, it should be increases, the likelihood of violence in teen relationships, but they differ as to what degree. In fact, I can just type that in there, can't I? They differ as to what degree and why mass media actually influences young people. So then I go on to, and again, I'm not going to go into detail here, but I summarize the first source. So we've got the first source discusses what they're doing. So I just say, like, this is what it's about. And then the writers of this piece examine, so I tell like how they are studying this. So they examine the percentage of sexual activity along with depictions of sexual risk and responsibility included in teen sex romp films, and then measure how viewing these films affect teens' attitudes about sex and condom use. And then I talk about what they say in there. So they quote these various outside studies, and I give an example of it, and then I cite it because I'm talking specifically about what they're saying in there. And then at the end, I say the writers argue based on their own research, and I give the argument, which I then cite with a page number, actually 2 page numbers. They had their argument spread out. But that's the basis of the summary. I say, this is what this particular source is about. This is how they come up with their data, or this is how they support their argument, and then this is their argument. And then I do the same thing on each one of these. So you get the tells what it discusses, and they studied a group of young people. That's how they found their information, and then the article argues that. So you see in each one of these, I give, this is what the article's about, this is how they make their study, and this is what they argue. So I do that for all 3 sources, and within every time I talk about like their argument and specifically things that they say, I put in-text citations in there. So some have more than others depending on what page numbers they come from, that kind of stuff. But again, talking about what the article's about, what the support that they use for their argument, and then what their argument is. Then I go on to explain how they agree. They agree that there is some connection between mass media relational violence and real-life relational teen violence. And then I go on to give an example from each source that supports that particular topic sentence. So they agree that there's a connection. And this particular source, they say this about the connection. And the second article, and I list what the article, I don't write the entire title of the article out every time, but I give an example from each one that, okay, this is how this supports that. So I give something from each particular source that supports that topic sentence that shows how they agree that there is connection. And then I have an explanation of how the sources disagree. Again, don't put this at the beginning of your paragraphs. But they agree there's a connection. They do not agree on how much of an effect or why it happens. And then I go through, and again, each particular article, I list a reason or an example of how they don't agree on those things, which really I'm talking about, I'm saying what each one says and then shows how they don't necessarily match up with each other. So this one's talking more about sexual violence as opposed to dating violence, but I talk about, I just say that's an important factor in unhealthy relationships. And then talking about lack of consequences. This one mostly focuses on that there's some connection, but their sample size is too small, so they can't really actually answer what the connection is. And then in the third one, focuses more on previous attitudes, but they don't actually study the previous attitudes. They just talk about the change that they saw within their study. So I give an example from each one of the 3 sources that supports what I'm trying to say in this article. And then I go on, I say something about some problems that I had because I didn't really find a whole lot of good sources, and then none of the sources really they didn't do specific examples. Like they didn't look at one particular movie and like look at all the parts of it that were bad, or one particular TV show, or one particular song, or anything like that. So I just kind of talk about that there's not good sources. They weren't very specific, and that they focus mostly on females as victims, even though there is a fairly equal rate of dating violence between among males and females. So I put that as an issue. And then I also, one of my issues was the one about rap videos. It was written in 1995 and was talking about a time when there were pretty much a video made for every song that came out. People watched MTV, and it was a much more popular form of entertainment, which is not so much the case today. So I would probably not end up using this even in my research paper, unless I really couldn't find sources. But, and then also the limits of the focus, it focuses only on African American teenagers. So the smaller focus group could skew the results as well. So I just kind of pointed those things out. And then I have a conclusion. Please put a conclusion on your paper that, I'll talk about next week, that you will kind of restate your thesis at the beginning of your conclusion. So the three sources here all agree that there is a connection between real-life dating violence and the relationship violence that is shown in mass media, but they do not agree on how much and why. It says the same thing as my original thesis, but it doesn't say it in the same words because that would sound weird. So you want to restate it, but not exactly. And then while teen dating violence and young people's exposure to mass media is a growing concern, so we're spreading back out. We're starting specific with that particular thesis statement, and then we're going back out to talk about the subject in general. Teen dating violence and young people's exposure to mass media is a growing concern. There are not a lot of sources that examine how behavior in media affects the level of interpersonal relationship violence in teens. Further research is needed, blah, blah, blah. So it kind of concludes up everything that we're saying there. Starts out reminding the reader of the argument, and then kind of goes back out to more general terms about the subject itself. And I'm doing a lot of hand motions that you probably can't see, but they help me talk. And then I have my works cited page that's got all the stuff on there. So I'm going to post this on D2L as well, so that you will have this to look at as you start working on your full paper. So you can go back and look and see, like, this is, you notice that I'm talking about the subject, but I'm focused on what each writer is saying. I'm not saying that this proves that blah, 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 and, in the outside world. I'm just saying this is what they set out to do. This is how they did it. This is what they argued. And this is how they agree, and this is how they disagree. So this will be a tool for you to use so you can look at it as you start working. You can maybe do an outline, something similar to this, where you make sure that you've got a paragraph about each one. If you write a paragraph about each one of these things, I went way over. You should be able to meet the word count with no problem if you do this kind of stuff. So this is a tool to help you. So make sure, let me just save my change there. So make sure that you use that. It will be on D2L starting tomorrow, I guess. It'll be on there Tuesday. And if anyone has any questions, it's kind of going to do it for us for today. Again, make sure that you do have your normal attendance quiz that's just 3 questions, and it's like really generic, just true, false kind of stuff. But then make sure that if you want to, you can do that midterm extra credit quiz to get your extra credit. And as always, if you have any questions, please just let me know. Goodbye.